while back, there was a situation in England in the House of Commons, and those of you that recall the great Winston Churchill took place when Mr. Churchill was a member of the House of Commons, and at that time there was also the first lady that had ever been elected to the House of Commons. Her name was Lady Astor. As would happen on great occasion, this one day, Lady Astor and Winston Churchill got into a furious argument on the floor of the House of Commons. I mean, they were just verbally going at it, fist to cuff. And out of desperation, after some time, Lady Astor turns to Winston Churchill and says, "Mr. Churchill, if I were your wife, I would put poison in your coffee." And Mr. Churchill says, "Lady Astor, if I were your husband, I would drink it." We're going to start talking about cashing objections. We talked about alternative choice minor clauses. Did I give you this one here? This is a good one. Do you think the for sale sign would look better on the left side of the lawn or on the right? That's an excellent one. That's one you can be using touring the house. Now, a good point to use this is when you're going through your visual aid presentation. If you feel the vibrations are really going good, then you can slip in one of these alternate of choice questions to test the water out a little bit more. Let me ask you a question. You know, closing is kind of like boiling a bullfrog. How many of you are from Louisiana area that know how to boil bullfrogs? Can I see your hand? You mean you folks don't know how to boil bullfrogs? Well, for those of you that don't know, get your recipe card out because I'm going to give you the formula. Let me give you an example. If you were to go out here to a pond and see a nice big bullfrog floating, sunning himself during the mid-afternoon, and took that bullfrog and threw him in a hot kettle of water, what do you think is going to happen with him? He's going to jump out, of course. Now, here's the way you boil the bullfrog. Number one, you take the kettle and you scoop him out of the water very gently. And then you set him on the stove and you turn the flame up just slightly. All right, not too much yet. And then in a few minutes when that water starts to just take the chill off of it just a little bit, he says, "Woo, that feels good." And then what you do is you turn that flame up just a little bit more. And he says, "Man, I haven't had one of these. That feels good." And then you start turning the flame up just a little bit more, and we know what happens to the bullfrog, don't we? He never wakes up. He just dozes off, and he's cooked. And that's kind of what closing is like. With your tie-downs, you start turning the flame up just a little bit. And then, if he starts going along with you, like he probably will, is you throw in an alternative choice question. And then that turns the flame up a little bit more. And you just get the momentum going, and this consummates the closing process. And why do people have objections? Number one is fear. They don't understand. It's a put-off. They don't want to seem easy. And surprisingly enough, a lot of it is to test you as an individual, just to see how good of a salesman you are. Steps in handling the objection. Number one is you isolate it, you question the objection, and you look a little puzzled. It's important to read the people and move with them. Statements that you can use, or beginning statements that I like to use in handling an objection, are like this. "Just to clarify my thinking, Mr. Jones, what you're saying to me is, if I read you correctly," and then you restate his objection. Now, you may reword it considerably, but you restate his objection. "Just to clarify my thinking, I can understand how you feel that way. By the way, I understand how you feel, but we should consider, if I read you correctly, it would be nice to have this out of the way, wouldn't it?" I've used that little phrase many times when people were, they like the presentation, they just want to procrastinate for another day or two to put off that decision. And just by using that little phrase, it would be nice to have this out of the way, wouldn't it? And have them look at one another and say, "Yeah, I guess it would. We got to make the decision sooner or later." And another good phrase to use that I like is, "You probably would sleep better tonight knowing this was out of the way, wouldn't you?" These people that say we want to think on it or we want to sleep on it, one thing I've done with that is when I've really gotten down to about my last resource, to where particularly the guy that says we want to sleep on it. They have a way of selling us those. is I say, fine, come with me, please. And I take the cooperative service agreement, walk into the bedroom, and I place it right in the middle of the bed on the pillows. Now, it takes a little guts, I assure you, to do this. But you'd be surprised how blush clients can get when you do that. And they say, oh, you character, come on. Or, if you cannot get the listing that night, leave the cooperative service agreement with them. I don't know what there is. There's something about having the animal in the house with them that night that the next day, a lot of times, they will call. Now, there's a danger in me saying that, is because the next time you're out on an appointment and you don't get it, you're going to say, this is when he meant to leave it. Now, I'm going to qualify that by leaving it. If you've already stayed there 6 hours minimum, then leave the cooperative service agreement. You people are not staying long enough, I assure you. Here's a dialogue that I like to use when people say, we have to have $2,000 more out of the sale of the home. Let's say, for example, maybe you do work up a seller's net sheet in your closing presentation, and they say to you, well, Raj, the net on it isn't just quite enough. Say, we do need to get $2,000 more. Let's say, for example, maybe their equity that you show is $20,000 after cost. And they say, we really have to have $22,000. Now, here's a dialogue that I like to use in that situation. If your loan were $2,000 less, we could do that. But that darn loan is too high, isn't it? It's not your position to be out there apologizing for what their loan is. It's not your position to be apologizing about how much equity they have. Your objective and your responsibility is to get them the most money possible, whatever the circumstances might be at that time. I've had people to sell a property and almost end up owing me money to pay my commission when they had that little equity. I had a guy call me one time, and it started working out. It looked like he was going to have about $10,000 equity. But see, he wasn't completely truthful with me. Once we ordered some information with the loan information letters and everything, he had 3 second trust deeds out against that property. Or a second trust deed, a third trust deed, and a fourth trust deed, and he had a swimming pool loan against it. This poor guy, why people try to do this, I don't know. When the good Lord started putting people together, he did not consult me. If you're having trouble closing on price, keep referring back to the comparative market analysis. And if the seller is continuously, even with using the dialogues I've given you and the techniques so far, if the seller is insistent on an extremely high price, ask him, could you please tell me how you arrived at that price? How to head off an argument about price. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I can assure you, these figures are facts of record. You're referring to your CMA. I have sat in this seat many times before. I can tell you what you want to hear, or I can tell you the truth. You do want the truth, don't you? Or you can say, one of the biggest dangers most homeowners make is overpricing their property. When you bought this property, do you remember that price was an important factor? Let me give you a good example. I listed a house. They would only give me a 30-day listing on it. And it was really, folks, I've listed some dogs in my day. In fact, one of them was so bad, in the master bedroom shower there was fungus that thick. And the cat took care of business in the shower himself. I knew he was going to have problems with the property after I listed it. I had called him the night before multiple listing tour. I had called him the morning of multiple listing tour. And then even when multiple listing tour came through, and I came through first of all to see how well they had cleaned that pig pen up, there was about 20 people in sleeping bags stretched out all over the rooms. Boy. And then they had these 2 scroungy old dogs, looked like junkyard dogs. Sold that rascal, though. Did. And to a real estate agent from Washington. Honestly. Yeah, on a loan assumption. I didn't finish up telling you about this one other property I listed. This one property I listed, they would only give me a 30-day listing on it, coming down to the time. And I was servicing a listing. It was within my farm area, and I was servicing a listing real well, and particularly because I just had a 30-day listing on it, I did give it some extra emphasis. They would not extend the listing with me. And one of the reasons was before the listing expired, here is other real estate people coming around my sign, and for God's sakes, people, don't do that yourselves. But there was some other real estate people, and they even gave me the names. You know, they do that. Yeah. You may think that they won't, that it's just confidential, but boy, do they. They just blab it out. They told me who it was coming around my sign. Here I was quoting them 3.5 to 4 points, and that's what the market was. And we were doing a big volume at the time through our office, and we were getting probably the best quotes in town from any lenders. And then here's other salespeople coming around my sign just the time the property's about to expire, telling them that they can get 1.5, maybe 2 points at the most if they were to place their property with them. Now, when I left that evening, I went in for a presentation to try to extend the listing. They told me all this, and I says, you know, I can tell you what you want to hear, or I can tell you the truth. Which do you prefer? And they said, well, naturally, Roger, we'd want the truth, but we've really decided we're going to list it with this other party. So I said, fine. I went out then, and I took my sign down. It didn't really expire until the upcoming midnight, or another day or two ahead of time. I says, if you're having that kind of success with other salespeople, I'm not going to embarrass my company, my reputation, or my sign by having other people come around it like they're doing. So I took my sign down then. They called me back about 2 days after it expired and said, Mr. Butcher, we really want to apologize to you. We'd like you to come back over and take at least a 90-day listing on the property. See, if you'll be honest and sincere with people out there, that's all you have to do. It doesn't take any of this double shuffling, playing around people. Let's get back into the dialogue here now. Here's the seller saying to me, you're the professional, how much do you think we should ask? Here's your dialogue. Please keep in mind that the asking price is flexible based upon the terms and length of time exposed to the market. Overpricing the property normally results in extremely low offers. Based on what is for sale now, we do need to remain competitive, don't we? You were wanting to move how soon? Keep in mind there that you're not coming back with a price. Just keep going through your CMA and the dialogues that I've given you. Here's the seller saying to me, we do have an appointment with another agent tomorrow at 10 o'clock. This is your dialogue. Bob and Mary, you know, I do want you to have the very best representation, so I will write on here that this agreement is to become effective at, say, 12 o'clock, and then put tomorrow's date, if not listed with another broker. That's fair, isn't it? What are they saying? Where do they go? Would you cut your commission? That, and we've got a friend in the business, with probably two of the biggest objections that we face. Here's a good one. The seller saying to me, Roger, will you cut your commission? Mr. Jones, let me ask you. You have heard of the old saying, you get what you pay for, haven't you? You know, if I could give you good service and charge you less, I would do that. You do want good service, don't you? See, what you're doing here is with your objections is ending everything in a question, tie-down, positive mode. Will you cut your commission? Bob and Mary, whether I will cut my commission or not is really irrelevant. As irrelevant as if I were hard-pressed for money at this time. Should I charge you more? The seller is saying to me, Roger, we want to sleep on it or we want to think it over. I can see how you might feel that way. Just to clarify my thinking, what phase of the program is it you want to think over? Is it? Then you recap. Remember the summary close? Is it the price we're offering the property for sale? Is it the description of the property? Is it my personal integrity? Is it the integrity of my firm? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And you're recapping every phase of your program that you've outlined so far. You see, until you get a final objection, you've got nothing at all to close on, other than we want to think on it or we want to sleep it off. Want to sleep on it or want to think it over. Why should we list with you? Other brokers can do the same thing. Mr. Jones, you just hit the nail on the head. See, if you start defending yourself at that position, he's going to kill you with it. All right? You compliment him by saying, you just hit the nail on the head. They could, if they would, but here's the difference. I think you know, I will. We're really not sure yet that we will be selling. I see. If I understand what you're saying to me is that you like the program I have shown you, but you are not sure of when to put the property on the market. Is that correct? They think you're going to let them go. So what are they going to do? Yeah, that's right. We're just not sure when to put the property on the market. Fine. Many of my past clients have been in the same situation, and here's what we do. And then you explain the deferred plan. And the deferred plan goes like this. As an example, if this were my cooperative service agreement right here, what I would do is take and write right up the side, sellers reserve the right to cancel this agreement if they do not, and then you tell whatever situation it is. I know you're out there on the front line, people saying, well, we'd sell this one if we could just find another home, but we don't want to put this one on the market yet. They do it here in this area? Yeah. These guys must have a seminar on how to defend themselves against real estate salespeople. In this situation, again, you can use a deferred plan, because what's happening to you now is you're going out there spending a lot of time trying to find them a home. You come back and you say, you know, I think I found something. You know, then they say to you, just yesterday we were driving through this area and there was this open house. Gee, I wish we were thinking of you, but this guy was so nice, or this lady was so nice. I see people rubbing their heads back there. I think we might have just had a couple happen. And this is how you can get around it, is with a deferred plan, is that seller reserves the right to cancel this agreement if they do not, or if we do not, find them a home that they want to purchase in 90 days or whatever. Then you have to do a little selling with this too. What you have to do is say, what we can do is go ahead and I'll have my secretary take care of all the paperwork. We'll go ahead and write sample ads for the property. And then when the right situation happens, either you do get orders to transfer if that's a situation, or they do find the home that they want to purchase, and that's the situation. Whatever the situation might be, you can fit it to this deferred plan. You can tell them that in selling them this idea that we can go ahead and have all the paperwork made up, and then when that situation arises, they get orders, they find the house, whatever it is, we just slip it right into multiple listing, and we save a lot of time, won't we? That is a goodie. I used to carry 4 and 5 of these around. Now let me give you an example of the big advantage of doing this. If you're out here working your tail off in a farm area, and you hear of these type of situations that you could adapt this to, and you don't take advantage of it, then what happens if some nut like me comes knocking on the door 2 days later, and I find that out? Salespeople used to call me and say, you've got a lockbox on that property over there. Is it for sale? I don't see a sign on it. No, we're holding off on marketing the property. It'll probably be available in about a week or 2. These are goodies. These are like money in the bank. And I assure you, you will sleep a lot better. Would you like to sleep better? You don't have to worry about those things then. We have a friend in the business. Now you have to watch this one because there's some switches in this. I know there's a lot of dialogues that people have given you probably already. If you're using them and they're working, continue using them. I've heard some sales trainers say, haven't you heard that you shouldn't do business with a friend, you should do business with a professional? If you're using that dialogue, to me it sounds like you have just insulted this individual by saying that his friend is not a professional. So I don't like that one. Let me give you one that I do like. When he says, we've got a friend in the business, complimenting. Oh, really? Who is it? Perhaps I know them. You see, being a professional in the business myself, I know all the top producers. Now watch now, there's some more switches in this. If he says it's Jim Brown with Zinger Realty. Now this is if you know Jim. Oh, sure, Jim is with Zinger Realty and a fine fellow. Jim and I do a lot of business together. By the way, do you think the for sale sign would look better on the left side of the lawn or on the right? Watch now, there's more switches in this. If you do not know the individual that they name, when they say, we've got a friend in business, oh really, who is it? Perhaps I know them. They give you the name, and this is if you do not know them. No, I'm afraid I don't know him or her. What office is he with? Now this is another switch here. Now this is if it's an out-of-area office. Does your friend specialize in this area? If they say no, Mrs. Jones, let me ask you, if you were a licensed real estate agent that did work in this area and an out-of-area broker listed a property, would you be as eager to show it? Of course not. Now this is if the friend is in a local office and you haven't heard of him. Now if you say, well, he's probably new in the business, they're going to kill you with it. You let them say it by asking, is Jim new in the business? Well, he didn't say. Is Jim full-time in the business? Well, he didn't say. No, I'm afraid I don't know him. By the way, would you like open house this Saturday Or would next weekend be better? You'd be surprised how well those things work. But you've got to use them. Now, these dialogues are on your flashcards that you have received. And people listening to this wonderful cassette unit can also purchase them through our home office. Elmer Fudd of Brand X Realty, the seller says to you, Elmer Fudd of Brand X Realty said he could get us $3,000 more. You know, Mrs. Jones, that bothers me. Did Mr. Fudd give you a visual presentation? What do you think the chances are? Did Mr. Fudd spend several hours researching information? Okay, but most probably, how did he do it? Right. He had his car running out front. She swung the door open. He looked down the hallway. Oh, yeah, we can get you $96,500 for this. No sweat. You know, that's a danger with us being in the business for very long, is we can do those appraisals like that. You know, you can walk in a house after you're in the business 6 months, and you can tell within $200 what that property is going to sell for, can't you? No way. I can't. I'm not an appraiser. I don't pretend to be, because I noticed one thing. One of the first properties I listed, I thought I was really going to be this heavyweight to come in, and I appraised the property for less than what their first loan was. That taught me a lesson that, you know, find out what that loan is, then maybe go up from there. Needless to say, I didn't get that one. I did not get that one. Did Mr. Fudd work up a comparative market analysis? Well, maybe, you know, but most probably not with that type of appraisal. If all answers are yes, if he did these things, then continue. How did Mr. Fudd explain he could get that much? Now, this is if the seller is still insistent on listing it at the higher price. If I read you correctly, you seem pretty set on trying it at the higher price. Is that correct? Yes. Then what do? Right. You just listed his house. Or you could do this. You know, Mr. Jones, there are people in this business that will list a property at any price. How do you think the owner would feel 6 months later when the property hasn't sold? Now, be very careful with that dialogue. You have to have it just right. You cannot be pointing at him and say, how do you think you would feel 6 months later when your house hasn't sold? He'll throw you out if you do it that way. You have to do it this way. How do you think the owner, a third-party owner, would feel 6 months later after his house hasn't sold? Your office is not close to our home. I know today we get listing leads from quite an array of wide area. Here's some dialogue that will work. When they say to you, well, your office is not close to our home. You know, that's a very good point. Let me ask you, if my for sale sign were in your front lawn and you were the buyer, would it make any difference to you how you dialed the phone number? What are they going to say? No. If I were to advertise your property, isn't it true that I would be describing your house to sell it rather than my office? If I were holding an open house, wouldn't it also be true that buyers would be coming here rather than to my office? As I understand it, Mr. Jones, what you are hiring me for is my ability and resources to produce a qualified buyer for this property. Isn't that correct? This is what I call my marriage certificate close, and this is a very good item to keep in the back of your presentation materials as extra ammunition. Now, you have to be careful using this. It has to be with a couple or a husband and wife that you have pretty good rapport with. Only thing is, you just can't get them nailed down. And as an example, the marriage certificate close goes like this. This would be your leading dialogue into it. You know, Bob and Mary, this evening I'd like to perform, with your permission, a little marriage ceremony between me and you. And here's the way this marriage ceremony goes. This marriage ceremony, performed this day between this client and myself, by this marriage ceremony, I, as a real estate representative, do agree to the following: to look after the client's best interest always, to be available at all reasonable times, to furnish an estimate of market value, to provide a progress report at least every 2 weeks, to pre-qualify my buyers before showing the property, to advise of any change in market condition. Bob and Mary, you do want these types of services, don't you? To place the property in multiple listing within, then write in there 2 working days, or whatever length of time it takes you. to install a for sale sign within whatever length of time it takes you, number of working days, to provide a seller's net sheet showing the client an accurate estimate of seller's proceeds, to seek always for anything that will benefit this client. This client may terminate this agreement at any time if I, their representative, should breach this agreement. And then you start writing your name on this, turn it around, and ask them to okay it. And I explain it to them that if I do not service you properly, you have the right, by this marriage ceremony, to cancel that agreement, that listing agreement, that cooperative service agreement, anytime you want to, if I do not do this. And you do want good service, don't you? And I assure you, and I sincerely feel, if you will not do at least this for that client, they should have the right to back out of an agreement and list it with somebody that they will get service from. Let me mention a couple things before we go on. I don't know if any of you noticed it, but I have a real bad hearing problem. Because, you see, if I'm in a closing situation, as an example, the owner can sit right across the table from me, grab me by the shirt, and say, now listen, butcher, we're not interested any way at all in listing our property with you. You see, I can't hear him.